I should rather say welcome back to this session on the next steps on developing UN sustainability indicators with the ranking agencies. Today we'll have the pleasure of welcoming the ranking agency QS. You may have attended the first part of this session, which we held last week with Times Higher Education. We had 117 registered participants from 30 different countries. So we hope to reach a similar audience despite the American election. This is the morning session. We'll be holding exactly the same presentation this afternoon at 5 p.m. Continental European time for accommodating the different time zones. My name is Alexander Nebel. I'm an institutional data manager at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, EPFL, in Lausanne. And I will be moderating this event together with my colleague, Christina von Oelreich. Christina?
Yes, thank you so much. And I would like to welcome you all. My name is Christina von Oelreich, and I'm working as a sustainability manager at KTH in Stockholm. And I have the responsibility for our sustainability office. So I'm really looking forward to have this discussion and presentations today together with you.
Thank you, Christina. Just a few words on the Zoom webinar functions. So we would strongly advise you to use the side-by-side mode view option on the top of your screen. And please, since we will not take any questions orally, use the Q&A box option that you will find on the bottom of your screen. And please vote for the questions that you think are interesting for you as well, so that the questions are promoted and we can take them with a higher level of priority. All the questions that we'll not be able to take today because of time issue, we will address to QS in a written manner so that we'll have the chance to take all of your questions. You may recall that last week with Times Higher Education, we had a long 60 minutes Q&A session because the ranking basically exists and people had really specific detailed questions. So after this quick introduction, we'll organize this even a little differently today, and we'll hear QS present their idea about including sustainability within their rankings for 35 minutes. And of course, we'll take also your questions during a Q&A sessions, but only for 15 minutes. And then we'll reach to the conclusions and the next steps. So today we'll have the pleasure of hearing Lee Kemelins, who's head of evaluation at QS, Dr. Andrew McFarlane, ranking manager, and Daniel Kahn, who's really involved in research and rankings, especially this particular ranking. So I will unshare my screen. Thank you very much, QS, for joining us today, and we really look forward to hearing you present your new ranking.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me just share my screen. Bear with me a moment. Okay, so my name is Lee Kemelins. I'm the head of evaluation at QS. Today we're going to share a little bit of insight into how QS is looking at tackling sustainability questions in our evaluations. Our approach is going to be quite different to that you will have seen from THE, and it is certainly something that's in development at the moment. So we're really trying to sort of share our thoughts so far with you and really use this as a point of opening a dialogue to really get your insights into how we can develop things further. So I'm just going to start off by further introducing our team who are working on this project. So as I mentioned, I'm Lee Kemelins, the head of evaluation. So my role at QS is overseeing all of our rankings activities and also other quality frameworks that QS is involved in. So my role in that sort of varies in the ways I'm involved, but my real focus is on governance of those processes and also engaging in the sort of framework design side of things. I've also got my colleague, Drew McFarlane, with us. Drew, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Drew, Rankings Manager here at QS.
And we've also have Daniel Kahn with us. Daniel, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Daniel. I actually mostly work with business schools, rankings in business schools, but this has been a project close to my heart, and I've been investigating quite a lot the SDG goals and sustainability issues with and how to incorporate that into our rankings.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. So I'll just quickly go through what we're going to cover today. We're going to give you a little bit of background into who QS is and what we do. I realize there's quite a diverse audience here today, and some of you are very familiar with our work, some of you less so, so I'm going to sort of give you that background. We're really going to try and talk a lot about why we do things the way we do. And then we're going to move on to talk about how we're starting to approach sustainability questions to respond to our audience's needs. And then at the end, we'll have a time for some questions, and really want to ask you some questions as well to start to get some insight from you into how we can help you really sort of with the types of metrics we're looking at. So QS is a company that was set up in 1990 with this mission to enable motivated people anywhere in the world to fulfill their potential by fostering educational achievement, international mobility, and career development. When we started developing our rankings activities, they were really developed with a student audience in mind. So quite specifically, it was prospective international students looking to study abroad. And when you look at some of the metrics we use in our current frameworks, you'll see that it really links into the sort of needs of those students or their decision-making processes. Over time, of course, our audiences have evolved quite dramatically. Here you can see different types of stakeholders we have who are really utilizing our rankings to really understand their comparative performance to others in the world. And we're really trying to evolve this beyond rankings to really become much stronger sort of insight partners for the sector, and really look at university performance in a lot of other dimensions beyond rankings. Just a bit of history of how QS's rankings developed. They started off in 2004 with the World University Rankings. Our first edition had around 200 universities featured in it. We now have around 1,000 universities. We then developed subject level rankings in 2011, starting off with 26 different subject areas, employability focused rankings in 2015, and then program level rankings looking at the business school world in 2017. In 2018, we've looked at some more localized rankings, looking in different countries or regional areas. And in 2020, we now have quite a broad suite of rankings. We're ranking universities in 53 different subject areas, and we have over 70 million visitors looking at our rankings on our different websites each year. So we are sort of making quite a strong impact with those student audiences in particular. So I'll just give you a quick overview of QS's current rankings portfolio. So we have lots of different tools for lots of different audiences to look at university performance in different ways. We have a series of regional rankings. I'm not going to sort of list everything that's here on the slide, but I'm looking at different parts of the world and university performance within those contexts. We have those subject level rankings and program level rankings that I was talking about. We have and I realize my number on my slide here is slightly different. It's actually 53 subjects now. It's a little bit out of date here. We have contextual rankings where we're looking at different environments universities are operating in. A big part of that is the best student cities ranking, where we're looking at what the student experience is like studying in particular cities in the world. And we have mission-focused rankings, looking at different dimensions of university performance. So graduate employability is the big one, which oversees that. And then alongside that, we have a series of different ways of classifying universities that allow our users to really look at different types of universities that may be of interest to them and utilize this other information to see the types of views that they want. So QS's ranking is structured around 4 different pillars, which we feel really make up a world-class university. So a world-class university is good at research, teaching, they have a really strong international perspective. And one lens we look at university performance through, which a lot of our competitors do not, or not in any substantial way, is employability. And for our audiences, that original sort of international student audience, this is almost the top reason why they are making their choices, their educational choices. They want to know they're going to get the type of job they want in the employment market as an outcome. So that's a really strong focus of our ranking. This is our methodology that we use for our world university rankings. All of our different regional and subject level rankings have slight adaptation from this, but similar concepts. And this methodology, the top level methodology we've had in place right since that first edition in 2004. So it does provide the opportunity to see how performance has changed over time. It's consistent, it is producing relatively stable results, and we have some of our approaches sitting under this in the way we calculate things, really make sure it doesn't give priority to different discipline areas or universities that have particular focuses. We also, and importantly, have a very low dependence on self-reported data as well. So we have 6 indicators in our world university ranking. We have an academic reputation and employer reputation index, which really looks at the perspective of academics and employers to understand which universities they think are doing the best in their sort of fields they're familiar with. We look at the faculty-student ratio as a bit of a proxy for the sort of student teaching experience and so how personalized their education experience is likely to be. We look at some research metrics around citations per faculty to look at that aspect of university work. And then we look at 2 internationalization metrics, looking at the percentage of students and faculty who come from abroad on that campus to really get some insight into really how diverse that learning experience is likely to be and sort of the type of exposure they'll have to the world outside of the country they're studying in. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague Daniel, who's going to talk a bit about some of what we know about what needs and how they make their decisions, which will really sort of start to show you why we're going down the path we are with our approach to looking at sustainability issues.
Thank you, Lee. Yeah, so we've heard from Lee about our ranking methodology. And over the past few years, I've been involved in a lot of conversations, conferences, and maybe a pressure to say, why are we not including the SDG goals in our rankings? What are QS doing about this? I mean, when we wanted to tackle this subject, it's not just some comments from academics, from conferences we attend that are going to help us to make the decision. We wanted to look at what the data is telling us, and the data we're sitting on, the data other organizations are sitting on, and seeing whether it is the right decision to make, and what is the decision we want to make. So we know that 70 million visitors are looking at our rankings every year on topuniversities.com. And probably there's hundreds of millions when you join our partners up together as well, our media partners. So we know students are looking at the rankings just from the traffic. But we wanted to know, in general, what are students taking into account, and especially international students taking into account, because our ranking is internationally focused, when choosing a university. So what are the factors they're looking at? And the data you see in front of us, the chart you see in front of us, is taken from our international student survey that QS runs. This is the 2020 results of one question in particular, and we're asking what is important to an international student when choosing a university. So what we can see is that although in the middle we can see that a student wants to take into account that the university is well ranked, all of the other factors above, and mostly all anyway, are included in our ranking methodology. So it gives us a bit of assurance that we are actually providing students with guidance, helping them to choose a university. And really what we wanted to do was get another perspective of how the SDG goals, sustainability, environmental issues are perceived through their lens as well. So if we go to the next slide, we ran actually a pulse survey last year. We had nearly 4,000 international students respond to this survey. And I've extracted a few of the questions out of here. One of the questions being, when choosing a degree, if the content helped you to learn about reducing environmental impact, would that affect how likely you would be to apply to that course? We can see that nearly 80% of the students that replied said that it would be much more likely or somewhat more likely that they would apply to a course if the content they learnt about was environmental related. Another question we asked in the survey is how important it is that the university takes action to reduce its environmental impact. So I think it's not just enough to say that when they're choosing a degree, this might be important to students, but also when they're there in the university, they want, well, 88% said it's either essential or very important that the university is making a difference in terms of its contribution to the SDG goals, environmental impact. We also wanted to see the comparison of what the prospective candidates and students are telling us compared to what the parents think. Because I think there's always a difference between the sort of generation gap and what we might think, and what I'm a parent, so what we might think, and what actually children might think. So I borrowed the research from the Princeton Review, research, and they do an annual report on the College Hopes and Worries survey. And their question was really, if you had a way to compare colleges, and they're asking students and parents, and the college's, the university's commitment to environmental and green issues. That's how the question was phrased. How much would this contribute to your or your child's decision to apply to attend to the school? So there's a few things I want to point out. That 66% of the students said it somewhat, very much, or strongly would contribute towards their decision, depending on what the university's sort of attitude towards environmental issues were. But we can see the biggest difference is that parents think more that it's not at all important than students. So there is some evidence here that things are changing, and the sort of the new generation of students do want to help when choosing a university, that they do need more help and they do need more guidance. That doesn't mean they need another ranking, though. The next bit of research was, and this is taken from the academic survey that QS runs every year. And the question we asked was, how important is it within your institution that it takes actions to reduce its environmental impact? And we can see again, there's a majority that's saying, the academics are saying that it's essential or very important that their institution is taking action to environmental issues. So all this evidence was presented internally, and it's not enough just presenting it, so we wanted to make some move along and make some actions within QS as well. So we've got this quote from the CEO of Nunzio Quacquarelli of QS, that QS is committed to CSR as an organization, as demonstrated, and I'll talk more about that with the carbon neutral certification, and we're committed to categorizing universities and business schools which are most socially responsible within our rankings. So we thought it wasn't enough to just include something in our rankings on SDG issues, or just to talk about it and provide the evidence, but I think we wanted also to show internally the actions we're taking. So one of the first actions we took was to make sure that QS was a carbon neutral certified company. Earlier this year, there was a data conference that we run every year called Edu Data Summit. And there was many discussions around data and how to collect data within institutions on sustainability issues. Later this year, we're going to be running a Reimagine Education together with the Wharton School and University of Pennsylvania. And many of the topics are around SDG issues. We run I think a quarterly or a monthly newsletter. And we are looking more and more at, we can see here, it says the campus green, and we're looking at different campuses and environmental issues within campuses. So we're looking more and more at this. And QS is actually now running and helping run a charity, which is really focused around the 17 SDGs, and really it's giving merit and to the people around the world who are actually contributing to the SDGs through their projects and helping them with their SDG projects. We also, within next month, we've got our annual Apple conference, and there are a lot of topics we'll be discussing there as well around sustainability issues, SDG issues. If you are interested in attending, then there's, I think we'll be providing the slides afterwards, but there's a link there and on the next slide to help you register and to give you a nice discount as well. I'm sure a lot of the topics there will be very interesting, although very focused in the Asia region. So I've talked a lot. I'm going to pass it over to Drew, who's going to be talking a bit about what the immediate actions we're going to be taking, considering all the evidence I've shown today.
Thanks, Daniel. Hi again, everybody. Nice to be here and speak to you all. I think before I sort of launch into the slides, just to sort of recap, I think if it's not clear already, I hope it will be shortly, that what we're doing here at QS is listening and inquiring and sort of taking our time to find out what the best way is of approaching SDGs. It's such a huge topic. It's an absolutely crucial focus for universities as they move into the future and for the world as a whole. COVID has amplified that. The need to create research, particularly in like SDG 3, to tackle good health and well-being in a pandemic has intensified. As Daniel mentioned, it's becoming a much more important topic for students. And if we sort of combine all of these intensities of focus around SDGs, it might be tempting to be somewhat reactive and say, okay, let's get a new ranking out. I don't think we're at that stage yet. So what I'm going to outline is where we are at, what data we do have, and then start to think about where we should go from here. So what do we want to achieve? Well, we want to collect useful information from valid and legitimate sources to help students make these informed decisions with an SDG lens. I think it would be fair to say that students are not going to choose a university based on how good they are at SDGs. They're going to choose a university based on its reputation, its academic excellence, and then they're going to be motivated to find out how that university does in other areas that are important to them. And if sustainability and carbon neutrality, gender equality, if those things are important, the students will look at that information if it's available. And we definitely do find with the sort of, I'm hastened to call them millennials because it's used so horribly in the media, but the millennial generation, that will be something they'll be looking at when they choose a university. We want to engage institutions without being a burden. Myself, Lee and Daniel and other colleagues have sat down and thought, what could we look at that universities are doing on their own SDG pathway? So as people in this call today are, universities have directors of sustainability, they have sustainability offices. We could look at the recycling facilities, their gender equality policies. We could look at whether or not they are using sustainable, renewable energy. We could do many, many things, but at some point it becomes burdensome on the institutions to start providing that data. And I think that burden would be felt even more keenly on smaller, less resourced institutions compared to those larger and more heavily resourced institutions. So we don't want this to become a burdensome exercise for universities. We do want it to be a useful benchmarking tool to assist policymakers. Again, many of you in the call today possibly involved in the policy making of your institutions related to SDGs. QS rankings exist as a benchmarking tool. It allows universities to see how they compare with one another, how they compare with themselves year on year, how they compare to different regions. And this would be another element to add to that. We want to create a bespoke methodology guided by our academic advisory board. So our advisory board is composed of global academics, and they consult independently on the activities we do here at QS. And any direction we take in the rankings goes via that board. And I think I should say that joining that board is a an open process. You can register interest and take that conversation further. We want a methodology which compares like for like. How institutions approach SDGs is going to be different depending on the type of institution they are. The focus of which SDGs are important to them is going to be different. A more science or medical heavy institution is going to be focused more on maybe SDG 3 or SDG 13. A smaller social arts or liberal arts colleges is going to absolutely be maybe more focused on, SDGs 5 and 10, gender equality or reduced inequalities. So we need to make sure that we are fairly comparing universities at the stage they're at in their own SDG path, and not trying to compare a huge sort of MIT type of institution with all of its resources with a smaller one who's doing really fantastic work in gender equality, for example. And then we want to simplify the SDGs, so there are 16 plus 17 if you count the collaboration network SDG. That's probably not user-friendly for a student or for an institution looking to navigate their performance. So we propose to group them into parent categories to make that journey a little bit easier. So phase one, what have we done so far? Well, we work with Elsevier, the publishing company, already. They provide us with our research data and rankings. And as I'm sure many of you know, that they have created their own set of mappings for the SDGs. So Elsevier consulted with experts in the field to create keyword mappings. That was completed last year. And we have extracted the SDG data for all of those 17 SDGs for our world top 1,000 universities. What we'll be able to do is take those research data, so we've got publications, citations, field-weighted citation impact, and create an in-house citation metric, the way we do for other research metrics, and overlay that on our ranking. So the idea would be that students have a lens with which they can look at the performance of certain SDGs based on research. I think that's an important thing to reiterate at this point. It will be a research-focused phase. As we go further, we'll likely expand that. How we expand out from research is partly why we're having this call today. No firm decisions have been taken, and we're absolutely looking for input from the expert community. Slide, please. So you can see, for example, some of the keywords that are used for SciVal. Those of you unfamiliar with SciVal, it's the web-based sort of performance insight platform that Elsevier operate. And if you have a login, you can go into SciVal and look at this for your own institution. They have already mapped the 16 SDGs. You can click in and see how your institution performs. You can have a look at how other institutions perform. And so that's the data that we're looking at the moment. We're sitting on about 4 million papers worth of data. But what we're doing now is trying to find a way of aligning that with our current approach to how we use citations. What citations and publications are we satisfied with using? What will we exclude? How will we normalize it? This is all happening more or less as we speak. Slide, please. So it's probably no surprise to many of you that SDG 3, good health and well-being, by far and away the largest share of papers and citations. But interestingly, although it's the largest, it's not the most collaborative part. So for sort of intensity of collaboration, that tends to be around climate change and sustainability. And in terms of growth, it's to do with responsible consumption. So there are different ways that you can slice the data, different ways that we can look at this research data. I think slightly dishearteningly for an education company, the least impactful is quality education. So the least, in terms of citation impact is quality education. So there's different insights that we can infer from this data, different ways of absorbing it into the existing rankings we produce, and in future ways of possibly creating sort of standalone insights. Slide, please. these are the categories that we are proposing to group the SDGs under. As I said before, using them individually is possibly not the most user-friendly experience for a student or institution. So we have basic rights, equal opportunity, human potential, environmental impact, and power of organizations. So idea being that we group these, analyze them in categories, and use that to overlay to see how institutions are performing. Again, I'm sure these slides will be made available to you, and we welcome feedback on our grouping proposals as well. Slide, please. Well, next steps, that's, I think, again, the main part of why we're here. Where should we shine a light? We are performance people. We're the performance experts for universities and students. We are not the SDG people, nor have we claimed to be, nor are we purporting to be right now. That's why we're talking to ISCN and the component institutions that make up ISCN's membership. Just as Elsevier went out to the experts to consult on their approach to create their SDG mappings, so are we going out to the experts now to see where should we be shining a light for institutions on SDGs. We want to know what insights would help you. We want to know what's missing from the sustainability conversation, what data you think we should be looking for, and the flip of that, what you think is maybe something we should not be focusing on, or your expertise and experience indicates that is not a fruitful path to follow. I'm going to pass back over to Lee now. Thanks, and look forward to any questions.
Okay, yeah, so as Drew just summed up there, we're really hoping to use this as the start of a dialogue with you all, and we'll encourage you to type any immediate questions you may have in the Q&A box, and we can try and address those now. Otherwise, we would welcome you dropping us an email to rankings@qs.com. We can address any sort of individual questions through there, and we would also be looking at holding some sort of follow-up sessions on this over the coming months as well to, once we've been able to digest this information a little bit more, to really get any insights from you. So is there any immediate questions that anyone wants to pop in the Q&A box?
So thank you, Lee, Drew, and Daniel. I think we'll take the questions. We also have a few questions that we've taken before the start of this event. So Christina, would you like to start with the first question, maybe?
Yes, thank you so much. We have a question here to you. So the bibliometric data you use is identical to that of the Times Higher Education impact ranking is using. That's a question.
Okay, thanks for that question. Was that from Christina? Yeah. No, so Christina was saying it was from Malcolm. Yes, Malcolm. In terms of the mappings used, yes, Elsevier have created these SDG mappings and are available for anybody to use, ourselves, QS. It won't be identical at the point of execution, though. As I said, we have our own in-house methodology for creating citation metrics. We use different approaches to normalization. We exclude self-citations typically, multi-authorship papers, joint ownership. There's all sorts of decisions that go into our research calculations that are still underway as it happens. So first we request the universities that we want the data from. Then we look at that data. Then we find a sensible way of cleaning it, normalizing it, massaging it. We'll also be looking at our own weightings. I don't know off the top of my head the particular weights that THE allocated to, for example, field-weighted citation impact or citation count. That would be different as well. But the underlying extract, absolutely, it would be the same approach. Thank you.
Can I add that I mean, we did actually investigate other ways of extracting the data from research. So there's been a lot of research put in by other organizations such as the Aurora Project, SDSN, and they all have their own keywords of how to extract the data. Drew displayed some of the keywords that Elsevier are using, we could have gone in as well and said, these are our keywords based on our feedback as well. So the extracting the data from the database is going to be different depending on the keywords you use. And I think it's good that someone has a standard, and and then we can compare like for like elsewhere. And also, hopefully there's no bias around it. I've seen, if you do change the keyword by one, then it can bring in more citation, more papers, stack more papers. So it's really important that we try and make sure that it's policed well, and there's a good methodology behind it.
Thank you very much. So around 60 participants today with us this morning. Maybe one question. So you plan to extract data, bibliometric data, use maybe different keywords, different weights from THE impact ranking, different clusters. You've mentioned the clusters that you plan to use so that you can simplify the number of SDGs. How then do you plan to include that in your rankings? You've, I think, mentioned that yet you will not launch a new ranking. So what are your thoughts at this stage in terms of including all these data into what is existing?
Our current approach to it really, or our current thinking on this is, we are not going to create another ranking on this. So I just want to be really clear on that point. What we are looking at doing is overlaying different filters on our existing ranking, so our users can navigate that information in different ways. I mean, one thing Drew pointed out is a lot of our audiences really are trying to understand what the best universities are in the world, who are also good at sustainability, not the other way around. So we're sort of working with our sort of user experience really teams at the moment to look at the best way of achieving that. But we also, we're sort of more going down the path of looking at some sort of almost like rating on sustainability that will overlay, be laid over the top of our existing rankings, rather than sort of a completely separate index.
So if I may, sorry, Christina, just maybe a follow-up question to this one, because this event is a follow-up session of an event that we held at the end of June, where we ran a survey and people were really shared in terms of, should we rate or should we rank sustainability in a way? And if I understand correctly, you would take the rating approach in terms of having an existing ranking, but then you would give kind of a mark or a color or whatever, a smiley or whatever, so that people would just have an additional information on sustainability. Am I getting this correctly?
That's right. That's
okay.
Exactly the approach we're going to.
Thank you. Christina?
Yes, I think we can continue with another question from Malcolm. Once you have finished the process, what are the current thoughts of how highly this might be weighted in your total index, and which other categories would that share be taken from?
Well, I mean, I think following from Lee, at the moment we don't plan to weight it into the metrics, because that would, turn it into a ranking as such. We haven't really got that far down the conversation. So some of the things that we have to think about are the extent to which we reward the production of papers on SDGs, paper count, the extent to which we reward citations. Some smaller universities with lower numbers of staff will be doing really, really good work in some SDGs, but they won't see the same sort of citation measures as people working in climate management and environmental sort of protection policies. So we're still at the stage of thinking, just in terms of the individual metrics, papers, field-weighted citations, citation counts, how we sort of splice them before we can really even think about the question of the final weighting of any sort of rating or overlay. We're not at that stage yet. And again, welcome feedback on how we would do that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I'm going to take a long question from Sylvia here. Quote, it appears very problematic to regroup the 17 SDGs in subcategories because there are inherent trades-off between SDGs. For instance, increase employment through increased production, SDG 9, versus CO2 emission, SDG 13, that increase due to its activity. Therefore, an institution might not do very well in several SDGs, but on the expense of doing terrible at 4 other SDGs. This selective analysis of partial reporting will not reflect a holistic commitment to implement the SDGs of academic institution. How will you address this challenge? One question here. Who wants to take this?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. I suppose one of the things we sort of were trying to demonstrate in our presentation was that for our audiences, we know from our audiences that they want simplified information. You know, this is sort of the value we are adding for our audiences at the moment, because there is too much information in the world, and we're providing sort of simplified lenses to view that through. How we balance that trade-off between you know, sort of successes in one particular SDG and the other, we're still working on how to address that sort of from a statistical perspective with our data science teams. But there will be some sort of trade-off when you try and simplify information generally. As part of the phase 2 activity, we are going to be looking at whether we can provide ways of drilling down into that in a lot more detail to provide the audiences who want to understand that level of detail, you know, that level of granularity in it. So it's a bit of a work in progress to answer the question. I don't really have a complete answer at the moment, but that's sort of some of the background of thinking on why we're doing that so far.
If I could follow from Lee's answer, and it was Sylvia that was asking, yes, it's true that if a university was performing really well in 2 or 3 of the categories and not in the others, that's not, let's say, holistic in capturing their growth. But I think it is a sort of realistic reflection that universities will be at different stages on the path to their SDG goals, and depending on the type of institution they are, whether or not they're more science, social science, arts and humanities, the funding they have available to them, they won't all be able to approach all 16 SDGs, you know, in a nice linear fashion. And I think realistically we would have to reflect that.
And I think there's a lot of different approaches you can use as well. I've studied the SDG index run by the SDSN, and they actually bring everything together, the 17 together, and judge, you know, rank countries through the 17, and they've used different statistical methods as well to really compensate in order to compare. Yeah. So I mean, we're not at the stage to fully answer, but I think we definitely know that it's an issue, and we want to, you know, make sure that it's simplified for a student, but also the methodology in the background is strong and approved.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, thank you so much for that. And then we have also a question from Christine. Hi, thanks for an interesting presentation. How do you use AL machine learning to define keywords?
So Elsevier do that part of the process. Elsevier's data team worked with experts in the field to create the machine learning for those keywords, and we're using the approach that Elsevier have taken. You can find full details if you go into Google and type in, you know, Elsevier SDG mappings. I think that would take you probably to the right website to see how they do that.
Thank you. One question from Göran. Is your reputation questionnaires, in your reputation questionnaire, sorry, could you add, or are you planning to add any questions on sustainability as well, if that's something that you would consider?
We don't have specific plans yet. As part of this phase 2, it absolutely is something we will consider.
Thank you.
Yes, and then I also had a question from Christina. And what I would like to ask you is that a lot of universities, they're working with the integration of sustainability into program and courses. And is that also something that the students can see through the lens you're talking about? Is that something that you will also present? How do you look at that?
Yeah, I think when you looked at some of the data we showed about the student decision making and so forth, this was one thing that came through in that there's like 2 elements to it. They sort of wanted, or sort of 3 elements really that came through when we looked a bit deeper perhaps, and we went in this presentation. So students want to know that universities are incorporating sustainability issues into the curriculum, that they have sustainable practices on campus, and that their impact more broadly in the world is also looking at these issues. So at the moment, our first phase is only going to look at that last bit. It's about that broader impact in the world, which we're measuring through that research lens. When we go into the next phase of this project, we're absolutely going to look to address those other questions that came up. So how this sort of activity may be folded into sort of the learning experiences and curriculum elements, and also beyond that potentially as well. But it's something we are thinking about, but we don't have any answers on how to do that yet.
I also think that the rankings is limited in terms of the lens it can shine on that, but when the student clicks through the rankings to the school profile, there's much more information we can the universities can give on their activities, and the rankings we can't sort of put into metrics, let's say. So I mean the website can be there also to help with these other qualitative sort of information as well.
Thank you very much. One question from Anna Costa. I think you've explained very clearly that at this stage, phase 1 will be focused on bibliometrics. What are your thoughts about the next phases in terms of accessibility of data, availability of data, of public information? Can you share a bit what you're thinking of in terms of gathering data that go beyond bibliometrics, maybe, and should it be only publicly available data? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we're still consulting, on these issues. Really, starting that consultation is probably more correct. So I don't have a definitive sort of answer to that. As I mentioned, one of my big functions at QS is around governance of rankings, and as part of that, transparency is an absolute priority for me. My background before QS was in the public sector, and my real focus was on that sort of transparency of governance. So my perspective on it at the moment is that we most likely would only consider things that were in the public domain already. That way, there are appropriate checks and balances on that by the public. However, that thinking may evolve as we have further conversations, but sort of information being available in public, everything being transparent is absolutely the direction we're sort of exploring at the current time.
If I may, when do you plan to include this phase 1 into this phase 1? That would be a rating of universities according to bibliometrics. Do you have any agenda at this stage?
Yeah, so the phase 1, we're looking at launching ahead of next year's World University Rankings, which will be in June. So it will be by June 2021.
Thank you very much. Perhaps, Christina, one last question.
Yes, we have a last question here from Tarek. I also forget to mention that STARS program is also doing the same. So what is the expected added value by QS proposal compared to THE and the above?
Yeah, I mean, again, that's a good question. I think, there's quite I think that's one example, but there's quite a few different sort of frameworks out there. Another one, the green metric out of Indonesia, for instance, there's different sort of bodies looking at, these issues in slightly different ways. Adding to that conversation, we think in a way, and we're trying to do it in a way that specifically responds to our audience needs. Now, our audiences are slightly different, I think, than some of these other bodies. We've sort of presented a little bit of the background as to sort of the decision-making of those audiences and, what their needs for information are. So we're sort of specifically trying to address what our audiences are telling us. And sort of adding value to them, really. That's our main purpose in doing this.
Thank you very much. I cannot not address you one last question from our friend Paul Cross on the topic of transparency. How open can and will you be regarding the processing of data for sustainability metrics? More transparency that will presumably support credibility and acceptance by making the data available in a as granular as a form as possible. Others will also be able to use and reuse this for research and analytics that push the sustainability agenda forward. I think this is a recurring question and that we address also to Duncan. So maybe, what are your thoughts on this?
I suppose this sort of follows on from what I was saying before, and we're going to try and be as transparent as we possibly can with all of this. If we go down the path that we're talking about, or that I was talking about before, with only drawing on information that's in the public domain and so forth, already that data is available to people. We would strive to be completely transparent in exactly how we're calculating things, how we're arriving at our conclusions and so forth, and we're going to make sure there is, that background documentation available for anyone who wants to explore that in more depth. That would be our approach. In terms of how we would make the full data set available, which I think may be part of this question, that I don't have a complete answer on, but it would be available in some form as an outcome of that.
Thank you very much. I think time is almost over. We have 2 more minutes maybe for conclusion. Christina, would you like to take over?
Yeah. Thank you so much. Then we can, maybe if you stop sharing, we have a slide to show. Yes, but I can start. First of all, I would like to thank all the participants and the QS for sharing your work with sustainability issues. I think that is very interesting, and I have the feeling that we are pushing the work with sustainability forward, and we will also see that a lot of things is coming on from the universities concerning these issues. And as a member of ISCN network, I would like also to invite all of you to continue the dialogue in how to approach the sustainability issues and the work that QS is doing. I think everything is so important that can contribute to the sustainability agenda to move forward. So, of course, we would like to invite you, and then maybe also have some meetings about special topics that is something you want to develop. For example, how to collect and sharing data, and also concerning the methodology issues. Of course, that is always a challenge. So I think we're looking forward to continue the dialogue with QS. I think that is very important for us. We are also representing a lot of different kinds of networks. We have also CSR that has been involved in these works. So I think we together can do great things. So then we will invite, I think, QS to a new meeting, and maybe that should be in the spring next year or earlier, or also that we can have some special meetings concerning if it's something that we feel that we really can contribute to this important work you are doing. And then we also talked with the Times Higher Education Impact Ranking that we will have a meeting with Elsevier to get a better understanding on how they are working with the research part and using keywords and so on. So I think that was all from me. I would also just thank you all again, and then also that we will come back to you if we have some more questions, then we can send that to QS, and then the participants will have an answer back. So I'm really looking forward to the continued work with you. And Alexander, if there's something you would like to add?
I would like to thank you all for attending this session. Thank you, QS, also for taking the time to present your ideas, and maybe two more information. So this session has been recorded. You will find it on ISCN's website in the coming days. And there will be a survey will follow up this session. So if you would like to take 1 minute to take this survey, that would be very helpful. So thank you very much, everybody, and looking forward to more collaboration in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to be here. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.